talking about linear factors and zeros of polynomials. So what we're going to do is we're going to first find the factors of the polynomial and linear factors. So what we're going to do is we're going to factor this with what we already know about factoring. In a couple sections we're going to learn techniques on how to factor so we can factor better. But for now we're just going to use what we know already in order to factor this. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to get this polynomial equal to 0. We can't factor until it equals 0. Since this one already equals 0, I'm just going to find something in common with every term and pull it out. So I notice there's an x in every term. So if I factor out an x, I'm going to be left with x squared in the first place, then a negative 2x, then a negative 15, and this still equals 0. From here, what I want to do is factor this, like we learned in the last section. So I break this down, and what we do from here is we go ahead and find our factors of the leading coefficient, which is just a 1. That means I have a 1x and a 1x. Next, I want to find the factors of 15, which are 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. Odds are 3 and 5 are going to work. So what we want to do is we want to make this, since this is negative, we want one number to be negative, one to be positive. This one's going to be negative, this one's going to be positive. And just to check to make sure that we factored it correctly, I'm going to ignore this for a minute, multiply these two back together, and see if I get what's inside these parentheses. So I'm just going to ignore my x out front, take these two and multiply, take these two and multiply, and then when I add these together, do I get the negative 2 I want in the middle? Yep, so I factored correctly. That was just to check and make sure I did that. Now that I have this, I have it broken down into linear factors. It's linear because the exponent here is a 1. This is linear because the exponent is a 1, and this one is also linear because the exponent is a 1. Now that I have them in linear factors, what this tells me is that if these three numbers multiply together to get me 0, either the first one was 0, the second number could have been 0, or the third number could have been 0. If the first number is 0, that means x is 0. If the second number is 0, that means that x was negative 3. And in order for the third number to be 0, x had to be 5. So these are our zeros for our polynomial. So let's make sure we understand. These are the linear factors. They're factors with x in them, and they're linear because they're degree 1. So these are my linear factors. These are my zeros. A 0 for a polynomial is the location where the graph crosses the x-axis. So the 0 for a polynomial is a location where the graph crosses the x-axis. We also call it a solution. So a 0 is also a solution for x. If I plug one of these numbers in for x up here, in this first one, if I plug one of those numbers in here, it's going to make me 0 on this side. So 0 is a location, the graph crosses the x-axis, and it's also a solution for x. That's what a 0 means. What we're going to do right now is we're going to consider these as zeros, and what does the graph look like now that I have the zeros? So we've already talked about how to graph this one right here. This is a cubic, which means that our graph looks like this, or the graph looks like that. Because this is a positive number here, our graph is going to be looking like this first one. Now that I know that, I'm going to plot the points that I know on the graph. I know that at x equals 0, it crosses the x-axis. At x equaling -3, it crosses the x-axis. And at x equaling 5, it crosses the x-axis. So now what I need to do is I need to draw my graph like this one so that it hits these 3 points. To do that, it's going to look something like this. These 3 points are zeros. It tells me where the graph crosses the x-axis. What we're going to do now is I'm going to give you the zeros. We're going to work backwards and come up with our original polynomial in standard form. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you the zeros. The zeros are x equaling -2, x equaling +2, and x equaling 3. What I need to do is use this information to come up with my linear factors. Once I have my linear factors, I need to multiply them together so I can put it in standard form. So remember, these are my zeros. What we want to do first is find the linear factors. In order to do that, I now need this equation to have a 0 over here instead of a -2. So in order to make that a 0, I have to add 2 to both sides. If I add 2 to both sides, I get x plus 2 equaling 0. I do the same thing here. I want to make this a 0, so I have to subtract 2 from both sides. That tells me that x minus 2 equals 0. And I do the same thing down here. I want to make this side a 0, so I subtract 3, and I get x minus 3 equaling 0. Now working backwards from the last problem that we did, if this number equals 0, this number equals 0, or that number equals 0, if I multiply these 3 numbers together, since at least one of them is 0, it's going to equal 0. So if I take x plus 2 and multiply that by x minus 2, or multiply that one by x minus 3, these should equal 0, because when you multiply the numbers, they should be 0. These are our linear factors. Once we're at this step, we just need to FOIL all of this together, and then we will combine like terms to get our polynomial in standard form. So when I FOIL these together, x times x gets me x squared. X times -2 gets me -2x. This will give me a positive 2x. And this will give me plus, a minus 4. All I've done is multiply the first two together. I still have x minus 3 back here. So once I have the first two multiplied together, I want to combine my like terms. So a -2x and a positive 2x give me 0. So I have x squared minus 4 times x minus 3. All this still equals 0. I want to go ahead and FOIL these two together. So I take x squared times x. I get x cubed. X squared times -3, -3, x squared. A -4 times x, -4x. And a -4 times a -3 gives me positive 12. All this equals 0. What I want to do is combine my like terms. This is x cubed, this is x squared, this is just an x, and that's a constant. Do I have any like terms here? Nope. Do my exponents, are they in order from highest degree to lowest degree? Yeah. So this is my polynomial in standard form. So when they give you the zeros, you want to first find your linear factors, set them equal to 0, then FOIL it all together to have your polynomial in standard form.